Hello everyone, Adam of Race World Media. I was experiencing knee and ankle pains, so I went to LOR Therapy to get a running analysis performed. And what I'm going to do is share with you my running analysis and results. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, and comment on this video, and you can also follow me on both Facebook and Instagram. To contact LOR Therapy, you can go to lorpt.com. Now on to the video.
There's basically a force plate in the treadmill, so we'll pick up force and pressure that you put when you're standing on one leg versus the other. And then you're going to step on there. So you can see, so when you shift to the right or the left, it picks up the footprints. Put more weight on your toes or your heels, that's going to pick that up. Alrighty, so what I'll do, I'm going to take you up to a nice comfortable running pace, similar to what you're doing when you're going out for a run or when you're racing. I'd like to get it as fast and comfortable as you can, and then I'm going to record it.
Okay.
Okay? We'll start with your left side. So I'll have you bring your right knee up and tell me when you're nice. You good? Okay, we're going to measure for 10 seconds. Steady as you can. Perfect. Relax. Now we're going to repeat that, but with the right side. And relax. So I'll take you up to that 7.0 miles per hour. But I'll kind of do it incrementally so you can feel comfortable running away from the tread, in the opposite direction, because it's typically a different sensation for people. We're able to see good your shock absorption, how well you land, and how well your shock absorption is. And then we can measure the angles of the hip and the knee and the ankle and the trunk from the side view as well.
So from the front view, we're going to be capturing more of the side-to-side movement, if there's any.
Yeah, so we're going to be able to see your trunk alignment and stability, pelvis alignment and stability, limb alignment and stability, and even foot.
Now you're going to be facing this way. Running normally, in the normal direction.
Okay, so this was the first thing that we looked at when I had you stand on left leg and then your right leg. So we're looking at single leg balance, which running is a series of single limb impacts. So just looking at that, the big thing I'm concerned with is this ellipse on either side. So the smaller it is, the better. It's a measurement of how much activity is happening at the foot and the ankle over that 10 seconds. And so I'm looking here, 95% confidence ellipse, and you're 833 on the left, 1002 on the right. And the goal would be to be under 400 on each of them. So you definitely have, your ankles are working hard, and sometimes that's because of weakness above, which might be contributing factor when why you feel both of the ankle pain after running. Because if they're working hard, that could put stress on the tissue. But we'll check your hip strength and knee strength and everything later. But that is what we're looking at with the single leg balance with that pressure and force measurement. Okay, so this is your pressure plot. We can bring this down. And here I'm just looking to see if there's any asymmetries left to right. And that's pretty symmetrical. I mean, a little bit more on the right, kind of up around here. You said your ankle pain, when you have it's a little more down around the ankle bone, right? On the outside section. So in terms of how your pressure distribution, that I'm not overly concerned with that. The balance, though, I definitely think that needs to be better. Okay, and then we come down here and we just look at step length. A lot of times if you're having pain when you're running, you change your stride length, but that's spot on, and we want to see typically within 4 centimeters difference, and you're like almost perfect. So that's not an issue there. The center of pressure analysis, that basically looking at, now that you're running, when it was static and I saw, the bigger circle with that ellipse, well, now we're putting it into motion, and you want to see a tight line throughout that whole time when you're running, and that's not too bad. That's not bad. I mean, you can see a little bit of extra, a little wider, or that could be a little tightened up, which then again is a measurement of how much is happening in your foot while you're doing that run.
All right, so there's a number of different things, Adam, that we're looking at from this anterior frontal view. The first thing is we're looking at where you contact the ground. And one of the things that we look at is to see, especially with like a lateral knee pain, that you may or may not be crossing over midline. John, can you draw a line from his umbilicus down? I mean, it looks fine, but let's just double check. And that looks fine. So we're going to go now to what we consider to be peak knee bending. Okay, so we're looking at your trunk alignment, your pelvis alignment, and then your leg alignment. Typically with these values, anything less than 5 degrees we consider within normal limits. So your trunk angle is 1.3 degrees, your pelvis angle is 1.5 degrees. That's awesome. That's super, super good. The main issue that we see is this 8.7 degrees. So just in standing, if your knees cock in like this, we call that a valgus position. And when your knees are rotated out, that's called a varus position. So when you're in peak load, you're going into what we call varus. So if you can look really close, your leg kind of bowing out a little bit like that. And what that can do is strain the outside part of your right leg. Okay, that would be very likely the main diagnostic movement issue that's contributing to your outside knee pain. So there's a number of different structures that could be irritating the knee, potentially the LCL, but very likely the IT band, which is a very thick type of connective tissue, an aponeurotic type of connective tissue, and it gets irritated when it's put on stretch too much. So whenever you cross midline like this, it causes tension in the IT band. And then when your knee's bowing out like that, it causes tension. So those are the main two diagnostic factors that are contributing to your knee pain there. Yeah, so 0 degrees and then it bows out. Boop. Okay. So typically what causes the crossover sign is if you're crossing over midline on the right side, tightness on the muscles on the front on the left cause your pelvis to rotate this way and then you cross over, right? And that's just because of naturally we want to maintain a certain stride length. And so in order to maintain that certain stride length, our body can compensate by having that pelvis rotate if we're tight on our hip on one side or the other, okay? What typically causes the bowing out this way is a little bit of weakness potentially in your glute muscles. Okay, so similar to the frontal view, we're going to look at what the joint angles are at initial contact. So when you contact the ground, mainly what we're looking at here is the knee angle, which is around 12 degrees. Okay, and then we go to peak knee bending, okay, which is 35 degrees. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is what John alluded to earlier, is your shock absorption. The ideal that we want to see as far as shock absorption goes is an excursion of 0 to 40 degrees. So you're contacting the ground with your knee a little bit bent at 12 degrees, and then your peak knee bending is around 35 degrees. So in general, if you land hard like this, that we would say is not suboptimal shock absorption, whereas if you kind of load softly, then we would consider that to be good shock absorption. So we're looking at what the initial knee angle is and then what the peak knee angle is. That may or may not be contributing to your knee pain specifically, but from an injury prevention perspective, that's something that we definitely can work on. So the other thing that is relevant here is the hip angle and then the trunk angle. So for the hip angle, we're looking for that to be greater than 25 degrees or so, and then the trunk angle we want to be between 10 to 12 degrees, something like that. So you can see just in general that your trunk is a little bit more upright, and your hip is not very flexed, it's more straight up like that. So in general, when we look at something like squatting, there's two different ways to squat. You can either squat with your chest upright and your knees coming forward like this, which we call a knee strategy. A hip strategy is where your hips come back, your chest is forward, and your knees don't come forward, your toes. In general, with a hip strategy, you're going to be using more of your glutes. In a knee strategy, you're going to be using more of your knees. Obviously, with running, we don't want you in a super deep hip strategy, but just by having a little bit of a trunk lean around 10 to 12 degrees, you're going to be biasing more of your hips, and that's also going to help you sit into your hips a little bit more like this. By being in that little bit of a hip strategy as you run, you're going to have greater success activating your glutes, which could in turn offload your knee a little bit. So I think that that's relevant. So typically, shock absorption, like suboptimal shock absorption, and then a knee strategy can go hand in hand.
I'm basically stopping the camera when we see the greatest bend in your knee, and then from there we're looking above and below that time when you have that greatest bend at that joint. And like Alex was saying, the hip, 25 plus or minus 5 degrees is optimal. And then like he said, the trunk position, that you need to get that a little bit better. And we haven't tested your glute strength yet, but if you have strength in the glutes, which I'm sure you do, you may not be able to optimally utilize it just because the trunk is not in a good position so you can access it. When they've done some EMG tests, the glutes actually have better ability to contract depending on the angle of the trunk. So if that's the reason where your knee is bowing out, now if you're in a better trunk position, you might access those muscles so then your knee doesn't bow out the load off the tissue.
So the other thing that we're looking at is a concept of triple extension, which basically means once we get the peak knee angle, the hip angle, knee, and the ankle angles all need to start decreasing. Basically, you're transitioning from loading into a pushing off phase. So with ankle injuries, what we typically see is that the knee and the hip numbers start to decrease, and the ankle angle starts to increase, which means you're not pushing off early enough in your stride. So, for example, at the knee angle, we had 37 degrees, and we're at 11.6 degrees at your ankle. If we go to the next frame, the knee angle dropped to 36.5 degrees, and the ankle angle went up to 14.9 degrees. And why this technology is so powerful is with the naked eye, you can't capture that. Typically, what causes the lack of push-off is weakness in the calf muscles, or it could be what we call motor control, which is it's just habit, more or less. But that can cause some excessive strain on your ankle.
So Adam, just recap from the side view, you need to have better angle at the hip, and then increased angle at your trunk, and then potentially earlier push off. So those are the three things that we see, but how do each of those contribute to maybe your pain? So.
All right, Adam, so from the back view, we're looking at some of the same angles that we saw from the anterior view, the front view. The trunk angle we're looking at and the pelvis angle, similar to, even though, actually go to peak knee bending there, John. So peak knee bending, you're under 5 degrees for both the pelvis and the trunk angle. And so that's all good, and we saw that from the other view, but this just confirms it, it's more data. Okay. So the other thing that we're looking at from the back view is how you're contacting the ground, and we can actually see that crossover a little bit easier. So just visually, evidence that you're crossing over midline. So on the left, you can see your whole shoe, right, when you're going to contact, and then on the right, we can see just like half your shoe when you're contacting the ground, which is evidence that you're crossing over, so we can't see it from the back.
Right.
So with regards to your ankle, the lack of triple extension from the side view, where you're not pushing off soon enough, and then potentially the crossover sign on the right is gonna particularly load the outside part, the front outside part of the ankle.
So we'll measure your hip strength, your calf strength, and see if there's a correlation in terms of, okay, well, either you're not using the strength that you have, or you don't have it to use. So then, gotta improve it and then make sure you're using it properly.
Thank you for watching my running analysis performed by LOR Therapy. To contact LOR Therapy, you can go to lorpt.com. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video, and you can also follow me on both Facebook and Instagram. I look forward to seeing you guys on the trails and in the ocean.